Hey everyone, welcome. We're going to be modeling a notebook, and the goal here is to cover some basic modeling, some texturing, and hopefully we'll get to some texture baking in Blender. This is intended to be like a low poly kind of game asset notebook, and let's just get right into it. The only thing I've done so far is I've looked up the overall dimensions of a notebook, and it came up with 7.5 by 9.75 inches. I added plane, and in the end panel, if you go to item, you could see that I just typed in 7.5 inches and 9.75 inches here, and that gave me our conversion. By the way, if you ever don't know what I'm pressing, look at the bottom left, you'll see my keys there. We're gonna go into edit mode and extrude this up, and let's create this smooth shape here. Now there are a lot of ways you could do this. I am going to select this face here, then hit Shift S. This is to move around the 3D cursor, and we're gonna go cursor to selected. That moves it to the center of that face. And in object mode, I'm gonna hit Shift A to add and go to circle. Now we don't need 32 vertices. Let's just go with 12. We'll scale this down and rotate it on X 90 degrees. I'm just gonna go my front view here, and I'm just eyeballing this, and let's move this along the Y axis and snap it here. This is the snapping menu up here. I just have vertex, hold down Shift, edge, and face selected so I can snap to anything at any time. I just have to hold down Control while I'm moving that around. G for grab, Y for the Y axis, snap to that face right there. It's very quick and intuitive once you're used to it. Just gonna clean up some of these vertices or delete them. I'm gonna extrude on Y and snap to this vertice over here. And then let's just grab this object and delete that face to make way for that. Let's just go ahead and join both these objects with Control J. Back in edit mode, these vertices are separated from each other. Select everything with A, M, merge by distance. And as you can see, that removed 0 vertices. Didn't really do anything. We can actually decrease this. Let's decrease it to 0.01 meters. And as you can see, that found 4 vertices. Let's grab the remaining. I don't think we'll be able to grid fill. Hit Control F, grid fill. No, and that's because we need one more vertice here. Let's try that again. Beautiful. Do that one more time. Now we have that curved edge there for our notebook. We want to inset the pages though. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna select everything that would be a page. And by the way, to do that selection that I just did, just select one, hold down Shift Control, select the other corner. It'll select everything in between, which is really nice. So just press I, and we'll bring this in there. Then we're gonna do a quick Alt E, extrude faces along normals, and just push them in a bit. That's looking great. We have kind of the rough shape of our notebook. We can continue on. Let's right click and hit Shade Auto Smooth. Now what that's done is it's added a modifier, the smooth by angle modifier. 30 degrees, you can see we're getting a really sharp edge there on the spine, which is no good. If we increase that even slightly, right? It's like 30.1, it takes care of that. The only other area I want to clean up is these corners here. Let's just add a bevel with Control B and add one extra loop there with my scroll wheel. That's pretty nice. Let's get into some very, very quick basic UV unwrapping. Go to edit mode, and I'll just select this edge here, kind of on the inside. Why am I selecting this? Well, to me, this is kind of a natural place where we would have a seam. So select all those edges, hit U, mark seam. Now, if we unwrap this right now, let's just go unwrap conformal. Hey, that's pretty good. That worked out nicely. However, we're not utilizing nearly the UV space that we could be, but we have a really big problem. The problem is we have this solid chunk right here. This, as you could see in our model, represents the whole page material. And the reason this is a problem is because that is so long and narrow, it's stopping anything else from being scaled up. We could manually come in here and scale this up, which is really nice. That's one of the options that we have. So let's just move this down to the bottom and scale this up here. Now what this is doing is the pages and the cover now have what's called a different textile density. In our case, that's going to be totally fine. So now, as you can see, we have a great UV unwrap. Let's do some quick material assignments. I want to have a little bit more geometry. Let me see if I can figure out what's going on here. Yes, okay. So we do not have a quad on the top and bottom cover. And that's because the way we inset this, or the way we bevel these corners, we ended up with 8 vertices. So that's what we call an n-gon. It's more than 4. Really easy fix. There's a few ways you could do this. One way, let's just delete that face on the top and the bottom. Then let's select that edge loop here and let's try to do a grid fill. Beautiful, that worked great. And now we have quads. Let's do the same thing down here, Control F grid fill. Now what I wanted to do is hit Control R and add a loop cut over here because I want the spine to have a completely different material than the cover. So the first material we can call pages, the next material let's just call cover, and the last material spine. The spine will make black, pages will make, or cover will make gray, pages will leave white. Now let's do some material assignments here. Let's select everything and just make everything the cover. And then let's select from here to here. And I'm gonna grab everything in between. I know I have some pages that we don't need, but we'll get rid of those in a second. You could always press C for circle select, which is really, really handy. Let's make this our spine. And now let's come through here, select our pages as kind of the last thing. And again, holding down Control Shift is a great way to select everything in between 2 faces that you select. And that will be our pages. So that's looking great as far as material assignment goes. Now we have UVs, we have material assignments. Let's get to some actual texturing now. So let's start with the really easy one. Let's start with pages. Pretty simple. What we're gonna do is drop down a noise texture, and you can always hit Control Shift and click on a node to solo the effect of that node. So that's what I just did there, and you could see this noise texture stretching across these pages. Now, because we have nice clean UVs, we can actually use those. So let's hit Control T to set up some mapping, and instead of generating a noise texture, let's use our UV map for that. Then if we increase the scale, you could start to see that nice noise texture. I want to scale this down on 2 of the 3 dimensions, X, Y, and Z. X could be 0. If we increase Y, we'll have more pages in there, maybe 15 or so. Let's use this. We're going to go into a bump. So let's just plug it into normal temporarily, and let's type in bump and drop that in between those and have this drive the height. And we could use the same texture to go into the base color, and that's a good starting point. For the actual cover, I'm going to add a noise texture. So let's just solo this to see what's going on here. If I change this, we can go down here and try to find one that works well for what we're going for. What I'm going for is kind of your standard Mead composition, like college ruled notebooks. We had to order them every year for school. That's kind of the pattern I'm going for. So to get there, I'm just going to increase this scale. By default, this is pretty darn close. I want to clamp this down to just black and white. So to do that, not a color ramp, I'm going to use a map range node, which is really, really useful. And what we could do is instead of going from a minimum of 0 to 1, we can clamp down that from maximum. As you can see, that clamps down and gets rid of a lot of those gray areas. We could also clamp up on the black. It's very, very crispy, very defined edges. And we could even grab both of these and kind of come up or down a little bit if we want more black or more white. I think something like that works well. Now this is just the base layer for our texture. Nothing's stopping us from coming in here and layering on more wear and tear, edge details. That's the beauty of texturing, is layering. That's the most important concept in my opinion when it comes to textures. A great resource for image textures. I really like textures.com. You do have to pay monthly for this. Just literally typed in book covers and you have all of these options. One that catches my eye is this one. We'll open that up in a new tab. I'm looking for some edge wear. This one up here, that could be nice, potentially. Great. Let's go back to Blender. Let's start to work with these. So I'm going to open up that new image and I'm going to drag it into Blender and that will bring in an image node. If we solo this, we could see the mapping, and this isn't going to line up perfectly. You can see our UV space down here. That's fine. We can actually adjust this with some mapping nodes. So just hit Control T to get that texture mapping, and we can start to kind of scale this. So I'm going to scale this one axis at a time. Something like that should be fine. We can also move it on X. Let's come into edit mode and make sure it's open here in our UV editor. And I'm gonna cheat some things just a little bit. What we could do, I just went to vertex selection. Let's select these and let's start to scale them on X. Now we're just looking at the straight image texture. We wanna actually layer this in to what we have here. So how can we do that? One thing we could do is we could use a mix color node, and we could use this as the second input. All this is doing is it's just mixing between two values. We have input A, input B, and we have a factor. Now this isn't very useful. One little trick is we could use the same image texture here to drive the factor as well. And then we could drop down our trusty map range node, which is probably my most used node, by the way. And we could start to play with the effect by clamping down in certain areas. As you can see, I'm bringing up the darks. So something like that could be fine. If we wanted to desaturate this, we could drop down a hue saturation value node. Okay, wrong place. There we go. Drop it in here. Now saturation could be like 0.3. I don't want that yellow coming through necessarily. Now let's layer in something else. Let's drop our other image texture that we have. Why not? And let's do something similar. Let's focus that one, but let's use our own mapping. Kind of do the same thing we were doing before. Let's scale it on X individually. Now let's focus on Y. So let's drop down another mix color node, put this into the B value again, and let's just use that as a factor. Let's drop down our map range again and see what we can get away with. I want to kind of bring in some of that edge stuff that we have going on. Cool. Now, I haven't messed with the roughness at all. Keep that in mind. That comes next. Let's just do another hue saturation value here. And let's just desaturate this a little bit. Let's keep it a little bit warm. Kind of like some paper is coming through there. Let's just show you what we've done. If we take all of this and mute it with M, you could see how much that layering has done for our notebook already. Let's start to play around with the roughness value. Let's start the equation with this guy right here, this noise texture. Let's plug it straight into the roughness, and that's going to be very, very glossy. So let's drop down another map range, and instead of 0 to 1, 0 is totally glossy, we can bring this up so it's maybe a max or a minimum of 0.3. However, we definitely want to layer in more than that. So let's drop down a mix color node and let's just do something crazy. Let's take the final result from the color and let's mix that in as the factor, let's say. And if this was perfectly rough, you could see that starts to bring in roughness here. Let's see what happens when we use it for this map range. Oops, not there. Let's go right there. See what's going on here. Let's make this pretty rough. I feel like this notebook would be kind of rough and beaten up a bit. And then let's do one final map range for the final roughness. There you go. It's mostly rough. As you look at that, it has a little bit of variation. I think something like that works nicely. Node graphs are always a little bit messy, right? But we're gonna hopefully bake this down so that we don't have this big mess in the end. It'll be nice and clean. Okay, now, normal map. One thing I did wanna do is I wanted to drop down a bevel node since we're gonna be baking this out. And this is a nice way to handle these sharp edges here. Let's just crank up the samples and do a really low distance, hardly noticeable in the final. That's not the only normal information we want. We could also use everything we've done so far as a normal map. Let's just start with the base color that we have. So let's go in here and use this base color. Let me clean it up a little bit. Let's use this as the height information. Now I want to add this label. We're going to go mix shader here. So this is in the end. We have this whole shader and we're going to mix in a totally new shader. Let's grab our image that I found online for this label. Just search for composition notebook label. You'll find a good one. And let's use the alpha of that for the factor on the mix shader. Immediately, this doesn't look right. Let's drop in another principled shader and let's drag that in for the second input. And just so we can clearly see what's going on, if it wasn't obvious already, let's turn that red. And now let's play with the mapping here, Control T. And as we increase the scale, you can see there's our label. The problem is this is repeating over and over again. Let's change this from repeat. Let's try clip. Will do the trick for us, I think. Let's move this into position. Now this is stretched a little bit because it wasn't a square image. So I am just going to have to scale that a little bit, just eyeball it. And let's place this about here. And let's use that same label here for the actual base color. And there you go. Right now, this is a PNG with transparency. That's how we're getting this alpha value. Let's drop down a mix color node. And I searched for torn paper on textures.com and I found a nice one. Let's use that. And let's bring this into maybe the factor on this mix shader node. Let's solo this. Okay, yeah, we're gonna have to play around here a little bit. Let's go, it's also set to repeat. Let's set it to clip. Now it is a little finicky to try to author textures like this with the mapping. So I'm just gonna widen this a little bit. Yeah, something like that. What exactly are we doing here? We're using this to drive the factor. Let's drop down a map range node. And again, if we clamp values, you could see what we can accomplish here. All right, this is very, very powerful. Again, the map range node, definitely my most used node ever. It really comes in clutch all the time, super useful. We could always flip or invert the result here. So we're eating away at the edges. I think I like that more just because I want to see composition book kind of recognize this. And yeah, we can play around with these values, find out how much of this we want to eat away, how strong we want the effect to be. Even in the parts where it's still there, you're kind of seeing through this, really, really rubbed off to the point where you could see the notebook underneath it. Yeah, I think that's really nice. However, the base color, I'm going to drop down a mix color node. I'm going to change this to color. And I'm just gonna yellow that up a little bit. Maybe I'll grab this same color that we have over here and we can decide how strong we want that to be. Yeah, I think something like that. Now you could layer in all kinds of stuff. One trick that I like to do, let me just grab something real quick. I like to keep masking tape handy. All right, this is a cool way to add custom little notes on your props. I could rip this off. Take a piece here. I need to find a pen in a second. Couldn't find a pen, found some charcoal. Anytime I could pick up, piece of paper, writing utensil in the real world and write something out, that's just gonna be much more authentic. That's gonna transfer over really well for a texture. So give me a second. I will just write down something. Let's see what we can write here. And let me just take a picture. All right, so we're in Photoshop, for better or for worse. You can do the same thing in Affinity Photo. I am just gonna eyeball this. I'm gonna go to Quick Object Select. Let's see if this picks up what we want. Come here and let's just crop down on this. Just export. Let's just do another mix shader. I know there are decal plugins. I try to go as vanilla Blender as I can for my tutorials, just so that people can follow along without buying stuff. Every now and then there is something I just really recommend that you buy, like UV Pack Master. That's great for UVs. Let's change this, same as the other ones. Let's change it to clip so we don't repeat here. And we're gonna really have to play with this scale. And again, I am just going to eyeball the proper dimensions. We really should be exporting textures on a square aspect ratio so we don't have to eyeball things. Let's do what we should have done before. Let's crop this, but let's tell it to be 1 by 1 square. This is going to be a lot cleaner. So let's export that again. I hit Control Shift Alt W to export quickly in Photoshop. That's quite a shortcut. And let's just go solid and then rendered view so it refreshes itself. And now this should actually be the same number all the way through. There's no guessing. We can rotate it without it screwing up the aspect ratio. That's just going to be a lot nicer to work with. Okay, we want this to have some interesting texture here. So let's go to the roughness channel. Let's drop down a map range. Again, I use it all over the place. It's very, very useful. Let's use this as a bump. And I'm gonna go back and do this for the label too. We forgot to do any of this. So let's find a good value here. Something like that, just subtle. Yeah, let's take the factor here, do a mix color, and let's take the actual tape color as the factor. Drop a map range in there and see what kind of nonsense we can get up to here. Something like that. It's kind of fading in a little bit. I like that. So yeah, this masking tape technique, it's one I use all the time on real world client projects. I just used it on this Real Engineering YouTube channel video, and it just adds some nice authenticity to your props. All right, now our pages by comparison are looking extremely white. Let's just go to textures.com. I'm just searching for grunge. I'm just trying to find some general kind of grungy textures, some kind of breakup noise. Something like this should work. This is a free one you can go download. And let's drop this into the pages. Let's drop down a mix color node and let's just mix that in. Play with the mapping a little bit. Again, if we go maybe down a little bit on X, up on Y, just make it flat, more flat, something like that. Yeah, ooh, I like that. Let's have this drive a factor for a color value, and let's have this be nice and yellow. And let's drop down a map range. Let's just drive all the yellow with this. Some areas will be much more yellow. Let's increase the scale overall, but more so on Y. This should also change the value. So let's duplicate this and let's have this one be the value. Have the same factor, and let's have this just be darker. Yeah, I think I like that a lot. And let's use that same thing for the overall roughness. Let's drop down a map range so we can control that. Bring this up so it never gets quite so glossy. Cool. Now finally, let's work on this spine. Let's add another texture and let's grab the same cover texture. Let's duplicate this though. So now it's a new texture, it's its own thing. And we'll just call this one spine 2 for a second. Let's delete the other spine. Well, actually, let's select the ones that belong to the spine and now assign spine 2. And now we can delete that and let's just call this one spine. Okay, now this is just using what we had over here. Obviously, that's not what we want to go for. Since this is a new texture, I'm just trying to reuse a lot of what we had. We don't need this mix shader or this mix shader because that was all the label and the little sticker thing or the piece of tape that we put down. So let's get rid of all of this. We just don't need it. This is the main thing I want to bring in right now. So let's get rid of all of this noise, everything that's going on here. Let's just delete everything except for the bevel. We can keep that. So let's just plug in this spine to start. All right, let's drop down a hue saturation value node. Let's decrease the value, maybe increase the saturation. Let's use this texture as the roughness. We're definitely gonna need a map range. That is glossy as hell, we don't want that. Let's clamp way down on the lights. Hey, that's pretty nice. See if we can get away with that same texture for the height on the bump node. So far, I'm just using basically one image texture to drive base color, the roughness, the normal. You can really get a lot out of one texture, which is one technique I just love to use. Yeah, I think that's great. Now, one thing we could do to clean this up and make it even better is right now we have these huge shader node networks. There's a lot that's being computed. There's a lot of images. What if we wanted to bake this down to a simple set of maps, something we could take into Godot engine or Unreal Engine so that we could turn this into a game asset? Well, let's do that next. Now, the first thing we want to talk about is optimizing the actual mesh, the geometry that we have. Right now, this entire notebook is made up of 102 vertices, 200 triangles. Now, that is not bad. Honestly, we could get away with that. Let's just, for the sake of it, see what it would take to make a low poly version of this. So let's call this one book_high, because that's our high poly. Let's duplicate it, move it over here, and let's call this one, you guessed it, book_low. And for this one, let's just go to object mode and let's have a look around. Now, the key here is we want to dissolve any edge loops that do not contribute to the object's silhouette. What do I mean by that? Well, if we dissolve this one, for example, see how drastically that changes the shape of this book? That's no good. We don't want to dissolve that one. That is contributing to the object's silhouette. What about this one? That one we could definitely get away with dissolving. Doesn't really contribute to the silhouette. This is a case where the high poly is already pretty low poly. However, I do want to show you the process of baking from a high poly object to a low poly. So we're going to roll with it. Even though we're going from 200 triangles to 172 triangles, it's not really a big deal. Now, something else we want to do on this mesh is we want to triangulate the mesh. So you could come over here, add a modifier and add the triangulate modifier. Come here to wireframe. You can see that has indeed triangulated that mesh. The reason we want to do that is because a game engine like Godot, Unity, Unreal, they all triangulate your mesh before they render it in the game engine. In fact, Cycles even triangulates your mesh before it throws it into a render. So what we could do by triangulating it now is to lock in the triangles so that they're not randomly generated in the engine, which might cause shading artifacts if it generates different triangles from what we use for baking. So yeah, that'll be applied when we export this object, but we are good to go. So let's save this. We have it labeled high and low. Let's clear the location of that so they're right on top of each other. I'm going to be baking within Blender. It works for me. You can use something like Substance or Marmoset Toolbag. Those tools are much more specialized. They're much faster and they offer a little bit more flexibility. However, I tend to prioritize staying within one software package just because it saves me a lot of time from switching back and forth between things. So you just have to know how to get it to work how you need it. Okay, with that out of the way, let's make sure our low poly has good UVs, and it does. These are fine. Let's roll with what we already have. We haven't really changed things, but you do want to make sure your low poly has UVs. A few things to take note here. Because we lost that loop, we lost that material assignment that we needed with the high poly. So we're going to have to do a high to low bake, which is exactly what I wanted to show you. Save everything, go to object mode. And this is the second add-on that I want to show you. This is absolutely essential in my opinion if you are baking objects like this. It is called Simple Bake. It's very, very useful. We're going to do a PBR bake. In the bake objects, we want to add the high poly object because that's what we're baking. However, we want to say bake to target. So the target is the low poly object. So we're adding book high as the bake object and book low is the actual target. Next, we want to auto generate a cage. So just press this button and that's going to give you this nice little cage. You can increase or decrease the cage margin. That's pretty squirrely even when I hold down shift. So we might have to come in here manually. We want this as close to the original as we can get it. Because these are essentially the exact same shape, we could have this be incredibly small. Let's leave ray distance, multiplier, all that stuff by default. Usually it works. Let's go to PBR Bakes. What do we want? We want diffuse. We want roughness. We don't need any of this. Let's grab normal. We don't need metalness. We don't have any metal. Let's just call it good there. Texture settings. Let's talk about resolution. You could go really high, something like 4K. I think we can get away with 2K. Just to be safe, we could bake at 3K and output at 2K. That just gives us a little bit more crispiness in our maps. And UV settings are good. We don't want to auto detect UDIMs because we know we don't have them. And we don't need to generate a new UV map or anything like that. So let me save, always save. One thing under export settings, let's actually export our maps, and I'm going to find a place on disk where I can export these. And yeah, let's just bake to target. So this isn't as fast as something like Marmoset Toolbag. Marmoset Toolbag is so fast with baking. Substance also very fast, but again, I'm taking into account all the time that I'm saving by using only Blender. I'm not jumping from software to software. So that was real time as I talked. All those images are now baked. So what we could do is we could turn off the auto-generated cage. Let's turn off the high poly object and let's just look at our low poly here. If this worked right, we can get rid of all of these materials and let's just create a new one called Book Baked. All right, and let's go to where we have the textures. And as you can see, we have everything baked down to one set of maps. Here's our base color, our normal, and our roughness. In the shader editor, just hit Control-Shift-T for a principal texture setup. And we could just grab all of those at once and it'll set them up automatically, which is really cool. And there you go, 2K maps, not quite as high resolution as the procedural materials, obviously. Let's bring that back just so we can compare the two. But this is a really nice set of maps. We have base color, we have roughness, we have normal. This could be taken into any game engine that you want. So there you have it. Do me a favor, please consider going and supporting me on patreon.com/RileyB3D. That's how I fund this channel and these free tutorials that I'm making for you. And go ahead and send me a message on there and show me your results. I can give you some feedback if you asked for it, or I could just say good job, because if you've made it through this video, that's quite a feat. This was a long one. I hope you learned some things along the way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.